obviously, here's a guy who so many of us got so much out of his work on income inequality, where really the dramatic story I think people didn't understand was the inequality within the highest 1% themselves, how the 0.1% and the 0.01% are also pulling away at dramatic rates. But his book wasn't called Income in the 21st Century. It was called Capital in the 21st Century, meaning that, as you alluded to, he changed his focus, he changed his area, he broadened his view at least to include the accumulation of wealth, not just differences in income, right?
Exactly, and it really it talks to a large extent about wealth, and there are stories that wealth is more concentrated than income. I mean, you take the bottom, I'd have to check the exact number here, but 30 or 40% of the population has zero wealth. Almost no one really has zero income. Pretty hard to imagine where you're living in if you have zero income. So poor people, but even they have positive income. But we have a large segment of the population literally has zero wealth. They, in many cases, negative. They owe more than whatever assets they might have. And then you have the top end, the top 0.1%, top 1% that have on the order, taking the 1%, some on the order of 30 or 40% of all wealth in the country. So you have a greater concentration of wealth than you do of income, and that is really the focus. And he argues we should expect it to become further concentrated in the decades ahead.
Great. Well, what I want to do is break open a little bit that maldistribution of wealth just for a couple minutes. We need to take a quick break now, but when we come back, and thank you so much for sticking with us, I want to talk a little bit more about that maldistribution of wealth and not just income. We'll be right back with economist Dean Baker. I'm Richard Eskow. I just got instructions not to break away. Great. So let's just keep going, and they'll edit that out for posterity. Okay, so we're talking about the maldistribution here of wealth as well as income, and there's an equation that he uses that's become quite notorious at this point. R is greater than G, meaning that if the return on, as I understand it, if the return on capital becomes greater than overall economic growth, this massive overaccumulation among the few becomes inevitable. Is that a reasonable way to paraphrase his findings?
That's right. It's a fairly simple story. So people who have wealth, they're seeing that grow more rapidly than the economy grows. So then, their wealth is rising relative to income, relative to other people's wealth.